Tonight, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to tell the truth. There was a time I didn't believe in miracles. I believed in survival, in getting through the day, in carrying the weight quietly, in pretending the cracks weren't there. Life has a way of teaching you how to endure, but not always how to hope. And then you walked into my life not like fireworks, not like a storm, more like a steady sunrise I didn't know I'd been waiting for. You didn't save me with grand gestures. You saved me with grand gestures. You saved me with presence, with patience, with the kind of love that doesn't shout, it stays. And somewhere between my broken yesterdays and uncertain tomorrows, I realized something powerful. Miracles don't always fall from the sky. Sometimes they sit beside you and choose you every single day. This speech isn't just about love. It's about overcoming the voice inside that says, you're too damaged, too late, too lost. It's about discovering that healing can wear a human face, that strength can arrive as softness, that the words, my love, you are the miracle, aren't weakness. They're awakening. Because sometimes the greatest comeback story begins the moment you recognize the miracle standing right in front of you. I used to think miracles were loud. I thought they came with thunder, with flashing lights, with the kind of moment that splits your life into before and after so cleanly that even strangers can see the difference in your eyes. I thought miracles were dramatic rescues, a hand pulling you from the edge, a voice shouting your name just in time, something cinematic, something undeniable. But life doesn't always move like that. Sometimes it moves slowly, quietly, like a man walking through his own shadow, not realizing how long he's been there. I was that man. I knew how to survive. I knew how to endure long nights and heavy thoughts. I knew how to carry silence like armor. I knew how to smile when I had to, speak when it was necessary, and disappear when it wasn't. I convinced myself that strength meant not needing anyone. That resilience meant building walls so high that even hope couldn't climb them. And I was good at it. I built a life that functioned. I handled responsibilities. I showed up. I kept moving forward because that's what you do when you don't know where else to go. You move, you breathe, you survive. But surviving is not the same as living place. There's a difference between a heartbeat and a pulse of purpose. There's a difference between existing and being awake. And then you walked into my life, not with noise, not with demands, not with a promise to fix me. You didn't look at me like a project. You didn't try to rewrite my story. You simply stood there, steady, present, unafraid, and somehow that scared me more than anything. Because when someone sees you clearly and doesn't flinch, you don't have your usual escape routes. You can't hide behind sarcasm. You can't disappear into distance. You can't pretend you're fine when someone looks at you like they already know you're not. You saw me, not the version I presented to the world, not the composed, controlled, carefully measured man. You saw the tiredness beneath the calm, the questions behind the confidence, the cracks in the armor, and you didn't turn away. You didn't rush to patch the cracks. You didn't try to force light into places that weren't ready. You just stayed. And that staying, that quiet loyalty began to do something inside me that I didn't expect. It softened me. I had spent years believing that softness was weakness, that vulnerability was a liability, that love was something beautiful but dangerous, like standing too close to a fire you're not sure you can survive. But you didn't burn me. You warmed me. There's a difference. You didn't change my life in the way movies describe. You didn't sweep in and replace the darkness with instant light. You didn't erase my past. You didn't magically remove the scars or silence the doubts. What you did was simpler. You revealed what was already there. You revealed the parts of me I had buried under disappointment, the parts that still believed in connection, the parts that still wanted to trust, the parts that still hoped, even after telling themselves not to. You reminded me that strength doesn't have to be rigid. that a man can be steady and still be gentle, that protecting your heart doesn't mean locking it away. I didn't know how tired I was until I felt what it was like to rest beside someone who wasn't asking me to be anything other than honest. And honesty, that's where the miracle began, because love, real love, doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require a flawless past. It doesn't require a flawless past. It doesn't ask you to arrive already healed. It asks you to show up. You showed up on days when my mind was heavy, on nights when silence felt louder than words, on mornings when doubt tried to convince me that I was too complicated, too guarded, too far gone to be understood. You didn't argue with my fears. You didn't dismiss them. You listened. And in that listening, something shifted. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. That's the thing about miracles. They're not always about being saved. Sometimes they're about no longer being alone in the fight. You didn't rescue me from my life. You walked into it. You sat beside the chaos and didn't complain about the mess. You looked at the broken pieces and didn't call them flaws. You saw history, not damage. You saw resilience, not weakness. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started seeing myself the way you did. That's the part no one talks about. Love doesn't just give you someone else. It gives you a mirror or a different reflection, a version of yourself that isn't defined by past mistakes or old pain. Through your eyes, I saw a man worth staying for. Through your patience, I felt a kind of acceptance I didn't know I'd been craving. Through your presence, I learned that peace isn't the absence of struggle, it's the presence of someone who chooses you in the middle of it. I used to think I had to earn love by being strong, by being unshakable, by never letting the cracks show. But you taught me something braver. You taught me that love isn't earned through performance, it's built through authenticity. When I was quiet, you didn't push me to speak before I was ready. When I was distant, you didn't chase me with accusations. When I was unsure, you didn't rush me with ultimatums. You gave me space without making me feel abandoned. You gave me closeness without making me feel trapped. That balance, that rare, steady balance, is something I once believed only existed in stories. But here you are, and here I am, a man who once believed miracles were myths, now standing in front of one. Because you are the miracle, not because you're perfect, not because you saved me from disaster, but because you loved me in a way that allowed me to save parts of myself I thought were gone. You didn't fight my battles for me. You stood beside me while I fought them. You reminded me quietly, consistently, that I was capable of more than survival. And that reminder became transformation. There were nights I wanted to retreat into old habits, to close off, to convince myself that depending on someone is dangerous, that opening your heart is reckless. But every time I looked at you, I saw courage. Not loud courage, not reckless courage, steady courage, the kind that chooses love even when it's risky, the kind that believes in connection even when the world has given you reasons not to, the kind that doesn't give up at the first sign of difficulty. Your courage inspired mine, and that's what people don't understand about love. It's not just romance, it's not just emotion, it's not just emotion. Loving you forced me to confront the parts of myself I had avoided, the fear of loss, the fear of vulnerability, the fear that I wasn't enough. But instead of running from those fears, I faced them, because losing you to my own walls would have been the greatest loss of all. You became the reason I chose growth over comfort, the reason I chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve something beautiful. And that belief changed everything. It didn't happen overnight. There was no dramatic turning point, just small moments, conversations at midnight, shared laughter in ordinary rooms, quiet understanding in the middle of chaos. Miracles don't always explode into your life. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they sit across from you, smiling softly, not realizing they're rebuilding a heart piece by piece. You never asked to be called a miracle, but that's what you are, because you made love feel safe. You made vulnerability feel powerful. You made commitment feel like freedom instead of confinement. Before you, I thought love would limit me, that it would demand sacrifices I wasn't ready to make, that it would expose weaknesses I couldn't afford to show. But loving you didn't shrink me, it expanded me. It expanded my patience, my empathy, my capacity to give, my willingness to trust. You didn't take my independence. You strengthened it, because when you know someone chooses you freely, you don't feel owned. You feel valued. And being valued changes a man. It makes him want to rise higher, to be better, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude for someone who sees the storm and still chooses to stay. I look at you and I don't see perfection. I see humanity. I see strength wrapped in softness. I see resilience shaped by your own battles. I see a heart that could have closed long ago, but didn't. You're not a miracle because life has been easy for you. You're not a miracle because it hasn't, and you still love deeply. You still believe. You still beave. You still give. And in a world that often teaches people to protect themselves by withdrawing, you chose connection. You chose me, and I don't take that lightly. There are men who go their entire lives without experiencing a love that challenges them to grow, without feeling a presence that calms their chaos, without discovering that strength and tenderness can exist in the same space. I was close to being one of them, close to convincing myself that solitude was safer, close to mistaking isolation for peace. But then you happened, and everything I thought I knew about love began to shift. You didn't fix my past. You didn't erase my scars. You didn't promise me a life without struggle. What you offered was simpler and far more powerful. You offered partnership. You offered loyalty. You offered a hand that didn't grip too tight, but didn't let go when things got hard. And in that offering, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not naive hope, not unrealistic fantasies, grounded hope. The kind that says, we can face this together. The kind that doesn't deny pain but refuses to let it define the future. You became the calm in my intensity, the anchor in my overthinking, the quiet reassurance when my mind tried to create storms out of shadows. And I began to understand something profound. Love isn't about being rescued. It's about being understood. It's about being seen in your entirety. Flaws, fears, strength, history, and still being chosen. Every single day, you choose me, and every single day, I am learning to choose you with the same courage. That's the miracle. Not the fireworks, not the grand declarations, but the consistency, the decision to stay, the willingness to communicate, the effort to understand instead of assume. You turned love from something abstract into something tangible, something I can feel in the way you listen, in the way you remember small details, in the way you remember small details, in the way you stand beside me, not behind me, not ahead of me, but beside me, equal. I used to believe that miracles were rare events reserved for lucky people. Now I know they can be daily choices, daily patience, daily forgiveness, daily forgiveness, daily commitment. And you embody that. You embody the kind of love that doesn't seek attention, but commands respect, the kind that doesn't need validation because it's rooted in authenticity, the kind that transforms not through pressure, but through presence. My love, you are the miracle, not because you changed who I am, but because you helped me become who I was always meant to be. Love is the quiet miracle that rebuilds a broken man, not with noise, not with force, not with grand speeches about destiny or dramatic promises about forever. It rebuilds him the way dawn rebuilds the sky, slowly, patiently, without asking for applause. A broken man doesn't always look broken. Sometimes he looks composed, successful, disciplined. He knows how to hold eye contact. He knows how to laugh at the right moments. He knows how to carry responsibility like it weighs nothing. But inside, there are fractures no one sees, old disappointments that hardened into caution, betrayals that turned into distance, losses that shaped the way he loves carefully, strategically, defensively. He learns to survive by limiting how much of himself he gives away. He tells himself that control is strength. He tells himself that silence is safety. He tells himself that needing someone is dangerous. And then love arrives, not like an explosion, but like a presence. It doesn't attack his walls. It doesn't criticize his defenses. It simply stands there, steady and unafraid. It says without words, I'm not here to conquer you. I'm here to understand you. I'm here to understand you. And consistency. And consistency. Because a broken man doesn't heal from pressure. He heals from patience. He heals when someone listens without trying to fix him immediately. When someone respects his pace instead of demanding vulnerability on command. When someone sees the hesitation in his eyes and doesn't interpret it as weakness. Love, the real kind, recognizes that strength and damage can exist in the same body. It understands that toughness is often stitched together from past pain. And instead of tearing those stitches open, it reinforces them with trust. Trust is a fragile thing for someone who's been disappointed. It doesn't grow from words alone. It grows from patterns, from someone who says they'll be there and is there, from someone who promises honesty and practices it even when it's uncomfortable, from someone who doesn't disappear when the broken parts show up. A broken man expects abandonment. He expects that once his flaws are visible, love will step back. So when love stays calmly, confidently, something shifts inside him. At first, he doesn't believe it. He waits for the other shoe to drop. He analyzes every gesture, every silence, every difference in tone. He prepares himself for loss before it happens because that's what experience taught him to do. But love keeps showing up, not dramatic, not desperate. And steadiness is powerful. Steadiness whispers to his nervous system, you don't have to fight here. It tells his guarded heart, you don't have to prove yourself worthy every second. It tells his mind, you can rest. Rest is unfamiliar territory for a broken man. He's used to vigilance, used to scanning for threats, used to anticipating disappointment before it arrives. So when love offers peace, it feels almost suspicious. But peace, when consistent, becomes believable, and belief becomes healing. Love rebuilds him not by replacing his broken pieces, but by helping him accept them. It doesn't demand that he erase his past. It honors it. It says, you survived, that matters. It says, your scars tell a story, but they don't define your future. And slowly, he starts to breathe differently. He starts to speak more freely. He starts to admit when something hurts instead of pretending it doesn't. That's not weakness. That's reconstruction. A broken man often measures his value by what he provides. Protection, stability, solutions. He thinks love depends on his usefulness. But quiet love teaches him something radical, that he is valued not just for what he does, but for who he is, for his thoughts, for his presence, for his humanity. And when a man realizes he is loved without performance, something inside him softens. Softening doesn't make him fragile. It makes him real. He begins to understand that vulnerability is not surrender. It's courage. It takes courage to say, I'm afraid. It takes courage to say, I'm afraid. It takes courage to let someone see the parts of you that you once believed were unlovable. And when love responds to that courage with acceptance instead of judgment, the rebuilding accelerates. He starts to rebuild his self-worth. And then, margin not based on external achievements, but on internal truth. He starts to rebuild his capacity to trust, not blindly, but intentionally. He starts to rebuild his belief in connection, not as a dependency, but as a partnership. That's what quiet love does. It doesn't announce its work. It doesn't demand recognition for every brick it lays. It simply keeps building, brick by brick, moment by moment. Conversation by conversation, a broken man may not say thank you every time he feels understood. He may not always articulate the transformation happening inside him, but he feels it in the way he no longer feels the urge to run at the first sign of conflict, in the way he chooses communication over withdrawal, in the way he begins to imagine a future that includes someone else, not as a risk, but as a gift. Love rebuilds his sense of possibility. Have believed that happiness was temporary, that peace was conditional, that commitment was a trap. But steady love challenges those beliefs. It shows him that happiness can be stable, that peace can be shared, that commitment can be freeing. Freedom in love is not about distance, it's about security. When a man feels secure, he doesn't cling, he doesn't concling, he doesn't control, he doesn't test loyalty through drama. He relaxes. And in that relaxation, his true character emerges. The humor he once hid, the dreams he once minimized, the tenderness he once suppressed. Quiet love uncovers those layers. It doesn't force them into the light. It creates an environment where they feel safe enough to surface. And when they do, the man who once identified himself by his damage begins to see himself differently. He is no longer just the product of heartbreak. He is no longer just the product of heartbreak. He is no longer just the survivor of disappointment, a lover, a man capable of deep connection. That realization changes how he moves through the world. He stands a little taller, not out of ego, but out of assurance. He speaks a little more openly, not out of impulse, but out of trust. He loves a little more boldly, not out of desperation, but out of confidence, because he has experienced something rare. He has experienced love that rebuilds instead of reshapes, love that strengthens instead of controls, love that stays instead of threatens. And once a broken man experiences that, he doesn't take it lightly. He protects it, not through jealousy or possession, but through effort, through consistency, through the decision to show up even when it's hard. Because he knows what it feels like to almost lose hope. He knows what it feels like to live guarded. He knows the loneliness of emotional isolation, and he refuses to return there. So he works on his communication. He works on his triggers. He works on his fear, not because he's being forced, but because he finally has something worth building for. That's the quiet miracle. Not that love appeared, but that it inspired transformation without demanding it. A broken man doesn't need to be saved. He needs to be understood. He needs to be respected. He needs to be respected. He needs to be given space to heal at his own pace. And when love provides that space, something powerful happens. He chooses growth. He chooses accountability. He chooses to confront his past instead of letting it dictate his future. That choice is not loud. It doesn't come with applause. It happens in private moments, in honest conversations, in apologies that are sincere, in compromises that are thoughtful, in boundaries that are healthy. Love doesn't rebuild him by erasing who he was. It rebuilds him by integrating who he was with who he can become. It honors the fighter in him. It nurtures the dreamer in him. It nurtures the dreamer in him. It protects the vulnerable parts without exploiting them. And one day, he looks back at the version of himself who believed he was too damaged to be loved, and he almost doesn't recognize that man, not because he's completely different, but because he's finally whole. Wholeness isn't perfection, it's alignment. It's when his strength and his softness coexist without conflict. It's when his past informs him, but doesn't imprison him. It's when he can say, I love you, without fear that those words will be used against him. Quiet love gives him that freedom, freedom from the constant expectation of loss, freedom from the need to prove his worth, freedom from the belief that he must handle everything alone. And in that freedom, he becomes more than he was, more open, more grounded, more alive. Love is the quiet miracle that rebuilds a broken man, not in a single dramatic moment, but in thousands of small, intentional ones, in patience, in loyalty, in understanding, in presence. And when that rebuilding is complete, or at least well underway, the man who once felt fractured stands stronger than ever, not because he was fixed, but because he was loved in a way that allowed him to rebuild himself.